Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast aimed at intermediate to advanced level English learners. Where is the most dangerous place in the world? According to the Economist magazine, the answer might be Taiwan. Now, this probably comes as a shock for anyone who has been to Taiwan, lived in Taiwan, or is actually Taiwanese. Is Taiwan really the most dangerous place in the world? Let's discuss it on this episode of Thinking in English. But first, why not follow the Thinking in English Instagram page, Thinking in English podcast, or the link is in the description. And you definitely should look at our blog, thinkinginenglish.blog, for all transcripts and bonus content. Here is today's vocabulary list. As always, the written list is available in the description of the podcast and also on our blog, thinkinginenglish.blog. Disclaimer. Disclaimer. A disclaimer is a formal statement saying that you are not legally responsible for something, such as information given in a book or on the internet, or that you have no direct involvement in something. For example, the disclaimer reminded viewers that the movie is a drama, not a documentary. Biased. Biased. If you are biased, you show an unreasonable like or dislike for a person or thing based on your own personal opinions. As in, the newspapers gave a very biased report of the meeting. To claim. To claim. To claim means to ask for something of value because you think it belongs to you or because you think you have a right to own it. For example, the police said that if no one claims the watch, you can keep it. Catastrophe. Catastrophe. A catastrophe is a sudden event that causes very great trouble or destruction. For instance, they were warned of the environmental catastrophe to come. Resolve. Resolve. Resolve is strong determination. For example, they are testing her resolve. To bristle with. To bristle with. This phrasal verb means to have a large amount of something, or to be full of something. For example, the helicopter hovered above them, bristling with machine guns. Superiority. Superiority. Superiority is the fact that one person or thing is better, stronger, etc. than another. As in, the Australian team soon demonstrated their superiority over the opposition. To tempt. To tempt. To make someone want to have or do something, especially something that is unnecessary or wrong. For example, the offer of a discount tempted her into buying a new car. And finally, prudently. Prudently. In a way that is careful and avoids risk. For example, they had prudently saved for retirement. The headline of last week's Economist magazine read, "The most dangerous place on earth." Where do you think they were talking about? Was it war-torn Afghanistan or Syria? How about authoritarian North Korea? or COVID hit India, or even the US after all of the police brutality and racism news stories. No. According to The Economist, these are not the most dangerous places on Earth. Instead, on the front cover of the magazine was a picture of an island surrounded by Chinese and American military forces. And that island is Taiwan. Now, I have to admit, I was slightly surprised to read that headline and see they were talking about Taiwan. If you're a regular listener, you might know that I was living in Taiwan before and at the beginning of the pandemic, and that I have studied both the domestic and international politics of Taiwan. And my impression of Taiwan is the complete opposite of that headline. In fact, when I left Taiwan, I would argue that I was leaving the safest place in the world. I was leaving a place with low crime and no pandemic to return to a struggling UK. In the week before I left Taiwan, I went to 7 restaurants. In the year I've been back in the UK since leaving Taiwan, I think I've been to a restaurant maybe 3 or 4 times, because for about 7 months they've been closed. So, what did The Economist mean when they wrote this article? Is Taiwan really the most dangerous place in the world? I guess before I start the discussion, I should put a disclaimer here. A close friend of mine from Beijing once got angry, or I guess annoyed at me, because she said I was too biased towards Taiwan. I had just decided I didn't want to work in China or the UK and instead chose to study in Taiwan. And to be honest, I probably am quite biased towards Taiwan. My time living there was incredibly enjoyable. Taiwanese people are friendly, the island is beautiful. However, I do understand that Taiwan can be a controversial topic for some people, and especially people from China. For those of you who don't know, Taiwan is an island of about 24 million people, 160 kilometers off the coast of China. Now, Taiwan is claimed by China, with the Beijing government insisting there is only one China. But Taiwan also has its own independent government, economy, and military. And it has had its own economy, government, and military since, I think, 1947, maybe. This episode is not really interested in who should control Taiwan or whether Taiwan is an independent country or not. But whenever you talk about Taiwan, these issues are always important to think about. So I'll try my best to remain neutral, but if you disagree with anything I say, please reach out to me or send me a comment and let me know why. I'm always interested to hear other people's opinions. So, is Taiwan really the most dangerous place in the world? The main focus of the Economist article is on the relationship between China, Taiwan, and the USA. For the last 50 years or so, the USA has sat on the fence, in the middle of the argument. They have agreed with China that there is only one China. And they have agreed that the government in Beijing is the government of China. But at the exact same time, they have protected Taiwan from Chinese interference. You might notice that probably your country does not have official diplomatic relationship with Taiwan. The UK doesn't, the USA doesn't. I think at the moment less than 16 countries do, and mainly small islands in the Pacific, and I think in Africa maybe Eswatini. Maybe that's it. But you still have a relationship with Taiwan. In the UK, for example, we have a Taiwan Representative Trade Office, which is basically an embassy, but it can't be called an embassy because the UK does not recognize Taiwan as a country. We recognize China as a country, and Taiwan has a unique position kind of in between country and province of China. It's independent, but not recognized. The United States is beginning to fear that it may no longer be able to stop China from seizing Taiwan by force. This relationship, this USA in the middle, might be changing. The head of America's Indo-Pacific Command, Admiral Phil Davidson, told the US Congress in March that he was worried about China attacking Taiwan as soon as 2027. So in the next 6 or 7 years. And war would be a catastrophe for the region. And not just because of the destruction in Taiwan and the risk of fighting between two nuclear powers. Another catastrophe would be economic. Taiwan is incredibly important economically, especially as one of the biggest producers of semiconductors and computer chips in the world. One Taiwanese company, TSMC, creates about 84% of the world's most advanced computer chips. War would destroy the electronics and technology industry in every country in the world. Taiwan is so far ahead of other countries in this industry, and this important computer tech industry, that it could take decades for American and Chinese companies to catch up. Another catastrophe would be the rivalry between China and America. Although the United States is not guaranteed to defend Taiwan, a Chinese attack would be a test of America's military power and its diplomatic and political resolve. If the USA did not protect Taiwan, China would overnight become the dominant power in Asia. In addition, America's allies around the world would know that they could not count on the USA anymore. Places like South Korea and Japan would have to become significantly more independent, and especially militarily. Why is the US so concerned about China and Taiwan now? After all, China has been talking about reclaiming Taiwan since the 1940s. Well, in the words of The Economist, the Chinese Navy has launched 90 major ships and submarines in the past 5 years, which is 4 to 5 times as many as America has in the Western Pacific. China builds over 100 advanced fighter planes each year. It has deployed space weapons and is bristling with precision missiles that can hit Taiwan, US Navy vessels, and the American bases in Japan, South Korea, and Guam. China is now a real rival to America's military power. And some American experts actually believe that China's military superiority may tempt China into using force against Taiwan, just because it can. China has destroyed the one country, two systems idea that they used in Hong Kong. And this has demonstrated to the Taiwanese people that they will never be able to keep their democracy if they unify. In recent years, China has also clearly become more authoritarian and nationalistic. Every year, China releases a kind of plan or speech about their performance. And in recent years, the section on Taiwan has become a lot more aggressive. They have kind of stopped talking about the Taiwanese people, which makes people worried that now they no longer care whether the people in Taiwan support China or not. In the past, China always wanted people in Taiwan to support China because that would make unification much easier. Perhaps now they realize that as a democracy, the Taiwanese people anyway, are probably not going to be able to join China peacefully. Nobody can really know what the Chinese leadership intends to do today, let alone what he or what Xi Jinping or his successor may want in the future. If anything, China's impatience is likely to grow. On the other hand, China has not even begun to prepare its people for a war. Not just any war, but a war against one of the biggest and best trained militaries in the world. Taiwan is not just going to roll over and let China invade. And Taiwan has a lot of soldiers, a lot of weapons, and a lot of support from other countries' militaries. China is also building its reputation, or at least its modern reputation, on providing stability and wealth amongst its allies. And war would damage all of this. China now has relationships with hundreds of countries around the world based on providing economic help and not being too restrictive on other countries' politics. A war against Taiwan would really damage these relationships. The USA and other powerful countries like Japan and South Korea in the region would probably help Taiwan prepare and defend itself. Because a powerful China is not good for those countries. And China is probably not going to attack if the USA is in the way. But as with any conflict, sometimes emotions and anger can make countries do crazy things. So, the Economist article was based on Taiwan's relationship with China and the USA. And they argue that Taiwan is the most dangerous place in the world because the island is at risk of war with China at any time. But for the Taiwanese people, their country probably doesn't seem too dangerous. Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen responded to The Economist on Twitter by saying, Taiwan stands on the front lines of democracy worldwide. As long as the people of Taiwan remain united and uphold our core values while responding prudently to regional developments, we can overcome the challenges posed by authoritarian expansion. Taiwan has been the most successful place in the world at responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. There have only been 12 deaths since the beginning. 12! Taiwan's economy is growing stronger than most countries in the world. 8% already in 2021. Many protesters and activists have left Hong Kong to live in Taiwan. And news organizations and companies have also relocated from China to Taiwan. There was an article a few weeks ago, I'll try to link it if I remember, about a BBC journalist, I think the head BBC journalist in China, the China correspondent, who felt so unsafe in China that he moved him and his family to Taiwan. So now the BBC's China correspondent will be reporting from Taiwan. Taiwan is also a successful and vibrant democracy, and was even ranked above many Western democracies like the USA and the UK in the most recent Freedom House World Freedom Report. And I actually made an episode about that report if you're interested. People on Twitter have said that Taiwan is only dangerous for people who want to lose weight, because the food in Taiwan is so delicious you will eat too much. Taiwan doesn't seem too dangerous to me. To be honest, I would have rather stayed in Taiwan for the last year instead of returning to the UK. It seems like the most dangerous place on Earth might also be the safest place on Earth. I used to say something similar when I lived in Japan. I never felt in danger from disease or crime in Japan. But there was always the risk of earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, typhoons, and heat waves. Taiwan is kind of similar, I guess. It is both safe and dangerous. Perhaps it is really safe and really dangerous. It just depends on what you're looking at. So here is today's final thought. On this episode of Thinking in English, I have tried to respond to an Economist article calling Taiwan the most dangerous place on earth. On the one hand, Taiwan is always at risk of violence and attacks from China. A war would be a catastrophe. A catastrophe for Taiwan, for China, for the USA, for the Asian region, and for the world economy. On the other hand, Taiwan is a successful democracy which stopped the pandemic in its tracks and has a very low crime rate. So is Taiwan really more dangerous than places actually at war now, like Syria or Afghanistan? Is it more dangerous than COVID hit countries like India and Brazil? Especially now India has over 300,000 cases a day. Is it more dangerous than a dictatorship like North Korea, where people's freedom is restricted? Is it more dangerous than a place at risk of earthquakes and natural disasters? I would say no. It is not the most dangerous place in the world. But what do you think? Thank you for listening to today's episode of Thinking in English. Please share with your friends, check out our social media links in the description, and send us a message. We really appreciate all of your feedback. And if you have any ideas for topics or future podcast guests or any other learning format, please let us know. And please leave me a rating. We're now on Instagram. I'm sure you've already seen it, but go there, check it out. Lots of good content about vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar. And Instagram is a great way to contact me. It's Thinking in English Podcast on Instagram, or the link is in the description. Also, all of the transcripts of the podcast are now available on the Thinking in English blog. Vocabulary list, comprehension questions, and all of the articles are there for you to read. That link is also in the description, so please check it out too. Thank you, and see you next time.